What happens when a military deliberately sends dozens of long-range drones into one of the most heavily defended logistics hubs on the Black Sea, even knowing that many of them will never make it to the target? At first glance, that sounds like an operation destined to fail. But according to publicly available reporting and open-source assessments, the objective may never have been for every drone to survive. Instead, the mission appears designed to answer a far more important question: can a relatively inexpensive swarm overwhelm one of the world's most sophisticated layered air-defense networks through persistence, coordination, and simple mathematics? That question became particularly relevant during reports of the large-scale Ukrainian drone operation targeting the Russian port of Crimea. Located on the eastern side of the Kerch Strait, Crimea is more than just another commercial harbor. It serves as an important logistics node connecting fuel supplies, petroleum storage facilities, and transportation routes supporting Russian operations in southern Ukraine and Crimea. Analysts have long identified the area as part of the broader supply network that moves diesel fuel, aviation fuel, and refined petroleum products toward military formations operating along the southern front. Because of that role, the port has reportedly become one of the most heavily protected locations along Russia's Black Sea coastline. Open-source intelligence indicates that multiple layers of air defense were positioned around the area. Naval patrol vessels monitored the approaches from the sea. Medium-range surface-to-air missile batteries provided area defense. Short-range missile and gun systems protected the final approach to the port itself, while electronic warfare units were believed to be operating nearby to disrupt satellite navigation and drone communications. On paper, this combination created exactly the traded defense network modern militaries aim to build. If those assessments are accurate, any incoming strike package would have to survive not one defensive system, but several operating simultaneously. That brings us to the weapon reportedly used in the attack. Unlike the small first-versus-few drones that have become common across the battlefield, the reported E-300 Enterprise belongs to an entirely different category. It is described as a long-range strike platform designed for strategic targets rather than tactical engagements near the front line. According to publicly available information, the aircraft uses lightweight composite construction, reducing its radar signature compared to traditional cruise missiles or conventional aircraft. It is also reported to carry a substantially larger payload and possess a range measured in hundreds, possibly more than 1,000 miles, allowing operators to launch far from the intended target. Just as important as its range is its preferred flight profile. Instead of climbing to higher altitudes where radar coverage is strongest, aircraft of this class are believed to fly extremely low over terrain or open water. This exploits one of the oldest limitations in radar physics, the Earth's curvature. Even advanced radar systems cannot detect objects flying below the radar horizon until they are relatively close. That characteristic would shape every stage of the engagement. Ultimately, the battle near Crimea was not simply a contest between drones and missiles. It was a competition between two fundamentally different military strategies. One relied on layered, technologically advanced defensive systems designed to stop every incoming threat. The other relied on numbers, persistence, and the assumption that no defense can intercept everything forever. As the drones approached the Black Sea coastline, that theory was about to be tested under combat conditions. By the time the strike package had crossed hundreds of miles of open water, the operation entered its most dangerous phase. According to publicly available reports, the first Russian defenders to make contact were not stationed at the port itself, but much farther from shore. A patrol ship operating in the Black Sea reportedly detected the approaching drones before they reached the main defensive belt, turning the vessel into what military planners call a forward picket and early warning layer position well ahead of the primary objective. That distinction matters. Modern integrated air defense is rarely built around a single missile battery. Instead, it functions as a series of overlapping layers, each intended to weaken an incoming attack before the next layer takes over. The patrol ship represented the first of those layers. Open-source accounts suggest the crew initially engaged with naval guns before employing short-range infrared-guided missiles. Even without long-range interceptors, a well-positioned warship can be surprisingly effective against unmanned aircraft, particularly if it catches them before they disperse. Reports indicate several drones were destroyed during this opening exchange. Equally important, however, was the effect on the rest of the formation. Once the leading aircraft came under fire, surviving drones reportedly altered their flight paths, abandoning a tighter formation in favor of a more scattered approach. From the attacker's perspective, that reduced the risk of multiple aircraft being destroyed by a single engagement. From the defender's perspective, however, it also created a far more complicated tracking problem. The next challenge came from Russia's medium-range air defense network. According to analysts following the conflict, an S-350 system was responsible for protecting the deeper approaches toward Ryukai, unlike point defense weapons designed to react immediately. Systems in this class often spend valuable time refining target tracks before launching interceptors. That delay is intentional rather than accidental. Radar operators prefer to build a stable firing solution instead of wasting expensive missiles on uncertain returns. Against conventional aircraft, this process is relatively straightforward. Against low-flying drones over open water, it becomes considerably more difficult. Sea clutter has long been one of radar's greatest challenges. Waves constantly generate reflections that obscure small objects flying just above the surface. Add humidity, changing weather conditions, and dozens of moving contacts, and distinguishing legitimate targets from background noise becomes significantly harder. This explains why low-altitude flight remains one of the most effective tactics for penetrating sophisticated air-defense systems. Eventually, the reported missile battery committed to engagement. According to publicly available information, multiple interceptors were launched almost simultaneously. Many reportedly reached their intended targets, demonstrating that modern surface-to-air systems remain highly effective when provided sufficient tracking time. But perfection proved impossible. Several interceptors reportedly failed to complete successful engagements, either losing track of their targets or detonating without destroying an incoming drone. While those numbers may appear insignificant, they illustrate an important reality of modern air defense. No defensive system operates with a 1-100% success rate under combat conditions. Every engagement introduces uncertainty. Every missile launch reduces available inventory. Every radar track competes with dozens of others for operator attention. And every successful interception creates something defenders generally dislike seeing on their radar screens: debris, fragments falling into the sea, smoke plumes, and shattered composite materials generate additional returns that further complicate the tactical picture. Instead of simplifying the battlefield, successful interceptions can temporarily make it more confusing. The attacking drones reportedly exploited exactly that moment. Rather than attempting to preserve formation, surviving aircraft spread across a much wider front, changing altitude and direction unpredictably. These maneuvers were unlikely to prevent interception altogether, but they forced Russian fire-control systems to continuously recalculate firing solutions. That seemingly simple tactic carries significant consequences. Guided missiles are extraordinarily capable, but they are also finite resources. Every missed interceptor represents not only a failed engagement, but another missile that must eventually be replaced. This highlights one of the defining economic realities of drone warfare. A defending military may successfully destroy dozens of inexpensive unmanned aircraft, while simultaneously spending millions of dollars in interceptor missiles to do so. From a purely tactical perspective, the defender wins each engagement. From an economic perspective, the exchange ratio may tell a very different story, and the battle was far from over. Beyond the missile batteries waiting closer to the port, another category of weapon was preparing to enter the fight: electronic warfare systems designed not to shoot drones down, but to make them lose their way before they ever reach the target. By the time the surviving drones reached the outer defensive perimeter of Ryukai, the engagement had already evolved into something much larger than a simple interception mission. According to open-source reporting, the next obstacle was not another missile battery, but an electronic warfare complex believed to be operating near the port. Unlike conventional air-defense systems, electronic warfare attempts to defeat an attack without physically destroying the incoming aircraft. Instead, it targets the information the drone depends on: its navigation signals, communications, and ability to determine where it is. For older generations of unmanned aircraft, this can be devastating. If a drone relies entirely on satellite navigation and loses GPS or GLONASS signals, it may gradually drift off course or fail to locate its intended target altogether. Reports suggest that several drones were indeed lost during this phase after suffering navigation failures. However, publicly available assessments indicate that the remaining aircraft may have been equipped with multiple navigation methods, rather than depending on a single satellite signal. Modern long-range strike drones increasingly combine inertial navigation systems with terrain matching, onboard mapping, and pre-programmed flight routes. Even when satellite positioning becomes unreliable, these backup systems can often keep the aircraft moving toward its objective with acceptable accuracy. Electronic warfare therefore reduced the size of the attack, but it did not eliminate it. As the formation continued closing on the port, responsibility shifted to Russia's short-range point defense systems. This is where the engagement entered its most intense phase. Unlike medium-range missile batteries designed to protect large areas, point defense systems exist for one purpose: stopping anything that survives long enough to threaten the protected facility directly. According to available reporting, gun- and missile systems engage the remaining drones at relatively short distances. Initially, guided missiles proved effective against several targets, but as the attackers continued to spread laterally and alter their flight paths, operators increasingly relied on rapid-fire automatic cannons instead of expensive interceptors. That transition highlights another important aspect of modern air defense. Missiles offer precision, cannons offer volume. When dozens of low-flying targets approach simultaneously, defenders often prefer to place thousands of projectiles into the air rather than attempting to achieve perfect missile locks on every individual drone. The strategy can be highly effective. It can also consume ammunition at an extraordinary rate. According to analysts, thousands of cannon rounds may be fired within only a few minutes during this type of engagement. Even then, complete interception remains extremely difficult because every surviving drone forces defenders to continue tracking multiple targets simultaneously while making rapid engagement decisions. At approximately the same time, reports indicated that Russian air defense units across the broader Black Sea region were responding to additional drone activity. If accurate, that detail may be one of the most important aspects of the entire operation. Military planners often refer to this as saturation. The objective is not necessarily to overwhelm one defensive system with overwhelming numbers at a single location. Instead, multiple attacks occurring across different regions force commanders to keep every available air defense unit committed to its own sector. That limits one of the defender's greatest advantages: the ability to shift resources where they are needed most. A reinforcement that might normally protect Crimea could instead be occupied defending another installation dozens or even hundreds of miles away. This transforms isolated engagements into a theater-wide resource problem. Despite sustained losses, several drones reportedly continued toward the port. Russian forces then introduced another defensive layer by deploying helicopters to intercept the remaining aircraft before they reached the fuel infrastructure. From a tactical perspective, helicopters offer unique advantages. They can reposition rapidly, search visually for low-flying targets that may be difficult for ground radar to track, and engage from multiple directions. However, helicopters also face significant risks. Unlike fighter aircraft operating at higher altitudes, rotary-swing aircraft must fly relatively close to the drones they intend to destroy. A large one-way attack drone carrying a substantial explosive payload represents a genuine danger if it manages to collide with its interceptor. According to publicly available reports, helicopter crews successfully destroyed several drones before disengaging, avoiding prolonged close-range engagements once their guided weapons had been expended. That decision reflects sound tactical judgment. Protecting the interceptor remains as important as destroying the target. The final moments of the battle demonstrated perhaps the most sophisticated tactic employed during the entire operation. Rather than sending every remaining drone through the same approach corridor, the attackers reportedly divided the surviving aircraft into separate groups. One group climbed to attract the attention of Russian defenses. The second stayed extremely low, using port infrastructure and surrounding terrain to mask its approach. This concept is hardly new. Military doctrine has relied on feints and diversionary attacks for centuries. What has changed is the platform. Instead of infantry or armored formations conducting the deception, unmanned aircraft now perform the same role with far lower political and operational risk. According to available reports, while the decoy drones drew defensive fire, a smaller strike group slipped through the final defensive belt and reached the fuel handling facilities. The operation had absorbed heavy losses from launch to target. But from the attacker's perspective, total survival was never the requirement. Only enough aircraft needed to reach the objective to produce meaningful operational effects, and according to publicly available damage assessments, several of them did. Regardless of the final damage assessment, the reported strike on Crimea offers a valuable case study in how modern warfare is evolving. The most important lesson is not that drones are unstoppable. They clearly are not. According to publicly available reports, the attacking force suffered substantial losses before reaching the target. Naval patrols, medium-range missile batteries, short-range gun systems, electronic warfare units, and helicopter crews all contributed to reducing the size of the incoming formation. From a tactical standpoint, every layer of Russia's integrated air defense network appears to have functioned largely as designed. Yet the broader question is different. If a defender successfully destroys most of an attacking force but a handful of drones still reach a strategically important facility, how should that engagement be measured? Modern warfare increasingly forces commanders to think beyond simple kill counts. What matters is whether the defended infrastructure remains operational after the attack and at what cost that protection was achieved. Military analysts often describe this as the economics of air defense. A long-range strike drone may cost only a fraction of the interceptor missile launched against it, even if the defender achieves an impressive interception rate. Maintaining that level of protection over weeks or months can consume enormous financial and logistical resources. Every interceptor fired must eventually be replaced. Every radar system requires maintenance. Every air-defense battery demands trained personnel and continuous logistical support. Meanwhile, the attacker may be able to manufacture replacement drones at a much faster pace. This imbalance has become one of the defining characteristics of modern drone warfare. Another lesson concerns saturation rather than technology. Throughout the conflict in Ukraine, both sides have increasingly demonstrated that simultaneous attacks against multiple targets can be more effective than concentrating all available resources on a single objective. If reports of coordinated drone activity across several locations are accurate, the pressure placed on Russia's defensive network extended far beyond Crimea itself. Every commander was responsible for protecting his own sector. That meant reinforcements could not easily be shifted from one location to another without creating vulnerabilities somewhere else. In other words, the challenge was not simply stopping one drone attack. It was stopping several at the same time. Electronic warfare also revealed both its strengths and its limitations. Jamming remains one of the most cost-effective methods for defeating a manned aircraft, particularly against drones that rely heavily on satellite navigation. However, as unmanned systems become more autonomous, incorporating inertial navigation, terrain recognition, onboard processing, and artificial intelligence, electronic warfare alone may become less decisive than it once was. Future defensive systems will likely need to combine electronic attack, kinetic interception, and increasingly automated command-and control networks capable of processing hundreds of targets simultaneously. This battle also illustrates an important shift in military thinking. For decades, precision warfare focused on destroying tanks, aircraft, warships, and headquarters. Today, planners increasingly recognize that fuel depots, electrical substations, transportation hubs, pipeline junctions, and logistics facilities can produce strategic effects equal to or sometimes greater than the destruction of frontline combat units. An army without fuel cannot maneuver. Aircraft without aviation fuel never leave